I counted the steps, 217. That's where I buried my brother, said the boy who returned after 8 years missing, clutching nothing but an old cap and a haunting truth. When only one Harper brother came back from the woods, the town of Ridgemont braced for a story darker than anyone imagined. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Rain pounded mercilessly against the asphalt of Main Street, turning Ridgemont into a town of blurred lights and hunched shoulders. Sheriff David Ortiz had just settled into the quiet routine of a Tuesday night shift when the call came in. A figure had emerged from the tree line at the edge of town, skinny, barely clothed, holding something in shaking hands. The dispatcher's voice cracked as she spoke. "Sir, you need to get down here. It might be the Harper boy." Ortiz's coffee mug stopped halfway to his lips. The Harper case was before his time, but everyone in Ridgemont knew the story. 2 brothers who vanished without a trace during a fishing trip 8 years ago. Linda and Michael Harper had gotten used to the hollow feeling of grief. Their home stayed frozen in time, Noah's baseball trophies still on the living room shelf, Ethan's guitar gathering dust in the corner of his old bedroom. They had stopped going to the yearly community gatherings 3 years ago, tired of the sad looks, the empty words of comfort. Michael's heart problems had gotten worse each passing year, the stress eating away at him. Linda threw herself into volunteer work at the local church, finding some peace in helping others while her own heart remained broken. They answered the sheriff's call with the tiredness of parents who had been let down too many times by false hopes and mistaken sightings. The medical center buzzed with whispers as doctors and nurses worked to help the young man. His body told a story of years in captivity, vitamin deficiencies, weak muscles, scars both new and old. His right hand wouldn't let go of the faded Seattle Mariners cap, fingers locked around it like it might disappear. Dr. Amara Wilson, who had been in school when the Harper brothers disappeared, felt her professional distance slipping as she wrote down his injuries. There was something familiar about his eyes, though they stared blankly at the ceiling. When she gently asked his name, he didn't speak, but his free hand moved to spell out letters in the air. Ethan. Linda fell against the hospital wall when she saw him, making a sound that wasn't quite a scream or a sob, but something more basic, recognition deep in her bones. Despite his sunken cheeks, the long hair, and the empty stare, she knew her firstborn son. Michael steadied himself on his cane, breathing hard as his brain tried to process what his eyes were seeing. The cap in Ethan's hand, Noah's favorite thing, told them what they wouldn't find. Detective Sarah Chen, newly put on the cold case, stood in the doorway, watching the reunion with professional distance, though her throat tightened at the raw emotion filling the sterile hospital room. News of Ethan Harper's return spread through Ridgemont like wildfire, stirring up a mix of feelings. Relief fought with fresh grief as people realized only one brother had come home. The media showed up within hours, camping outside the hospital and the Harper house, hungry for details. Old questions came back. Who had taken the boys? What happened during those 8 years? Where was Noah? Why now? The woods that had swallowed 2 children and returned only one became something to fear and wonder about again. In the local diner, people who had helped search years ago quietly shared theories, while Pastor Jim Mason organized a quick prayer service that filled the Methodist Church completely for the first time in years. 3 days after his return, Ethan Harper spoke his first words. "Water," he said in a rough voice, making the night nurse drop her clipboard in surprise. His voice sounded unused, like the muscles had forgotten how to work. Dr. Raymond Cole, the psychologist assigned to help him, noticed that Ethan seemed more alert after being separated from Noah's cap during a medical test, like the hat had been keeping him tied to some distant trauma. The cap now sat on his bedside table, always within reach. When Linda arrived for her morning visit, Ethan recognized her right away, his eyes clearing for a moment. "Mom," he said, the word falling from his lips like a prayer. She cried silently, squeezing his hand like she was afraid he might vanish again if she let go. The physical evidence told a disturbing story. Soil samples from Ethan's clothing matched the mineral makeup of an area near Crescent Lake, some 40 miles from where the brothers had disappeared. The forensic team found traces of underground living, a specific type of mold that grows in dark underground places, clung to his hair and skin. His fingernails contained remnants of dirt consistent with digging. Most telling was the perfect circle of scar tissue around his left ankle, suggesting long-term shackling. Detective Chen carefully compiled these details, building a picture of captivity that made her stomach turn. When she shared her early findings with Sheriff Ortiz, he took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "We're dealing with someone who knew what they were doing," he said grimly. This wasn't random. Michael Harper spent hours sitting beside his son's bed, reading aloud from Ethan's childhood favorite, The Hobbit. The doctors had suggested familiar things might help reorient him, and Michael clung to this task with desperate hope. He noticed how Ethan's breathing would change during certain parts, quickening at moments of danger in the story, calming during descriptions of the Shire. Sometimes Ethan would mouth words along with him, having memorized sections during countless bedtime readings before the disappearance. Michael found himself wondering what stories Ethan had told himself during his captivity to survive, what mental escapes he had created. The thought brought both comfort and pain. His son's imagination had always been strong, perhaps enough to preserve some essential part of him through unimaginable darkness. Linda transformed their home with careful determination, preparing for Ethan's eventual release from the hospital. She cleaned his bedroom, keeping his teenage things while updating the space for a young man now in his 20s. She researched trauma recovery, joining online groups for families of returned missing persons, though such cases were incredibly rare. The house filled with flowers and casseroles from neighbors, cards from strangers across the country who had followed the story. Linda accepted these offerings graciously while maintaining a protective barrier around their privacy. At night, she would sit in Noah's untouched room, holding his unwashed baseball jersey that had long since lost his scent. "I need to know," she whispered to the empty room. "Did he suffer? Did you see him go?" Questions she couldn't yet bring herself to ask Ethan. The FBI established a command center in Ridgemont's community hall, maps covering the walls as they coordinated search teams to comb the Crescent Lake area. Agent Marcus Reeves, a specialist in long-term abduction cases, worked closely with local law enforcement to manage resources and media relations. "Time is both our ally and enemy," he explained during a briefing. "The longer Ethan has to stabilize, the more he can tell us. But evidence in the field gets worse with each passing day." Volunteers from across the state arrived to join the search, including some who had participated in the original efforts 8 years earlier. A sense of grim determination filled these operations. No one expected to find Noah alive, but bringing him home would provide a measure of closure. Meanwhile, criminal profilers constructed a picture of the captor, likely male, 30 to 50 years old at time of abduction, knowledgeable about the wilderness, possibly with construction or engineering skills to create an underground holding facility. 2 weeks after his return, Ethan began to draw. Dr. Cole had provided art supplies as a nonverbal outlet for expression, and what emerged on the paper sent chills through the medical team. With careful precision, Ethan sketched the same structure repeatedly, an underground bunker with dimensions approximately 15 by 20 feet, divided into 3 chambers. One drawing showed a heavy metal door with elaborate locking mechanisms. Another depicted 2 narrow cots in separate cells, a small window connecting them. Most disturbing was the detailed rendering of a man's silhouette standing in a doorway, face deliberately left blank, holding what appeared to be a rifle. When gently questioned about the drawings, Ethan became upset, tearing the sketches and retreating into silence. That night, a nurse found him huddled in the corner of his hospital room, rocking back and forth, muttering a sequence of numbers that would later be identified as GPS coordinates. Detective Chen and Agent Reeves sat with Ethan the following morning, recording their first official interview. The session began tentatively, with Ethan responding in short answers, his eyes fixed on Noah's cap in his hands. The breakthrough came when Chen mentioned fishing. Ethan's head snapped up, his gaze suddenly present. "He watched us for 3 days before," he said, his voice steadier than it had been since his return. "Parked down the road from our spot. Blue truck, rust on the fender." This revelation shifted the investigation dramatically. What had been presumed a chance encounter was now revealed as planned abduction. Ethan could provide only fragmented details: drugged food, waking in darkness, his brother's voice calling his name from behind a wall. When asked about his captor, he described a tall man with a beard who rarely spoke but whistled constantly, the same folk tune that had been popular when the boys disappeared. "He made us call him Sir," Ethan whispered, his knuckles white around the cap. "Said our real names didn't exist anymore." Linda arrived at the hospital that afternoon to find her son more animated than she had seen him since his return. "I want to go home," he declared, meeting her eyes directly for the first time. "Need to see it." Dr. Wilson advised against discharge, citing concerns about Ethan's physical condition and psychological fragility. Michael, however, recognized the stubborn set of his son's jaw, a ghost of the determined teenager who had once argued for permission to take that fateful fishing trip. "He needs this," Michael told the medical team, his own voice finding newfound strength. "He needs to know he can leave." A compromise was reached. Ethan would visit the Harper home for 2 hours under medical supervision, then return to the hospital. As they prepared for this trip, Ethan made a request that broke Linda's heart anew. "Can I see Noah's room? I promised I'd come back for him. I promised." The Harper home had become a time capsule of grief, frozen at the moment of loss, and Ethan moved through it like a visitor in a museum of his own life. He touched objects with wonder: family photos, his guitar, books on his shelves, as though making sure they still existed. In Noah's room, he stood motionless, taking in details that had remained unchanged. The solar system mobile hanging from the ceiling, baseball trophies arranged by season, the half-finished model airplane on the desk. Without warning, Ethan crossed to the closet and reached behind a stack of games, pulling out a leather-bound journal none of them had known existed. "Noah kept secrets," he explained, his voice tinged with a hint of brotherly pride. "He saw the blue truck first, wrote it down." The journal contained Noah's observations from the days before their disappearance, including a rough sketch of a vehicle and a partial license plate, evidence that would prove invaluable to the investigation. That night, after returning to the hospital, Ethan experienced his first major breakthrough in recounting the captivity. Dr. Cole had been using a grounding technique, anchoring Ethan to the present through sensory awareness, when the young man suddenly began to speak in a steady, detached tone. "The bunker had 3 rooms," he said, confirming what his drawings had suggested. "We were kept in separate cells for the first year, could talk through a vent between us, but couldn't see each other except when he took us out for exercise, once a week maybe. Always blindfolded outside. Noah got sick in the second winter. Fever. I could hear him coughing." Ethan described how their captor had eventually merged their cells after Noah's illness, seemingly out of practical concern rather than compassion. "Said it was easier to feed us together." When Dr. Cole gently asked about Noah's fate, Ethan's composure cracked. "I held him," he whispered, tears streaming down his face for the first time since his return. "I held him until he stopped breathing. 3 years ago. He made me bury him outside the bunker." Wouldn't let me mark the grave, but I counted steps from the door. 217 paces northeast. I counted every day after that, waiting. The revelation of Noah's death, while long suspected, hit the investigation team like a physical blow. The search for the bunker took on new urgency. No longer a rescue mission, but a solemn duty to bring Noah home. The search area narrowed based on Ethan's information, focusing on a remote section of forest near Crescent Lake, where the terrain matched his descriptions. Satellite images revealed several potential anomalies: disturbed earth patterns, unnatural clearings, but the dense tree canopy hid crucial details. Ground teams methodically sectioned the wilderness, using cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar to detect underground structures. The work was slow, hampered by rough terrain and frequent rain that turned the forest floor into treacherous mud. Agent Reeves coordinated operations from a mobile command center, cross-referencing Ethan's accounts with topographical maps and historical land records. A breakthrough came when a team discovered an abandoned hunting cabin with a hidden trapdoor beneath rotted floorboards. The tunnel below had collapsed, but soil samples confirmed it matched those found on Ethan's clothing. "We're close," Detective Chen told the exhausted search teams during an evening briefing. "Whatever monster built this place, he left a footprint." Media attention intensified as news of the narrowed search leaked to the press. National outlets descended on Ridgemont, disrupting the town's fragile balance with aggressive reporting tactics and speculative stories. Michael Harper suffered a minor heart episode after being ambushed by cameras outside the grocery store, requiring overnight observation at the same hospital where Ethan was recovering. Linda found herself fielding calls from true crime podcasters and documentary producers, each promising sensitive treatment of their story. The family's privacy became yet another casualty of Ethan's return. Sheriff Ortiz established a security detail around the Harper home and hospital room, while FBI media liaison Jessica Torres held twice-daily press conferences to manage information flow. "We understand public interest in this case," she stated firmly during one contentious session. "But this family has endured enough without becoming a spectacle. The best way to honor their suffering is to help us find answers." Ethan's physical recovery progressed steadily under Dr. Renee Wilson's care. His malnourished body responded well to a carefully calibrated nutrition plan, and physical therapy helped address muscle weakness. Cognitive assessments revealed his intellect remained sharp, despite the trauma, though his emotional processing showed significant impairment. The most challenging aspect of his rehabilitation involved getting used to normal sensory experiences again. Years in the dimly lit bunker had made bright lights painful, and the noise of hospital sounds, beeping monitors, squeaking shoes on linoleum, distant conversations frequently overwhelmed him. Dr. Wilson developed a gradual exposure protocol, slowly increasing environmental stimuli as Ethan's tolerance improved. "Your brain is rewiring itself," she explained, using a metaphor he could relate to from his pre-abduction interest in computer programming. "It's running new code to process the world again." 23 days into the search, a cadaver dog named Sadie alerted her handler near a densely wooded ravine approximately 10 miles from the abandoned cabin. The area matched Ethan's description of his escape route, a steep incline leading to a creek that he had followed downstream until reaching civilization. Technical teams carefully cleared vegetation to reveal what appeared to be a ventilation pipe disguised as a fallen tree trunk. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed a substantial void beneath the forest floor. Agent Reeves immediately secured the scene, establishing a perimeter and bringing in a specialized extraction team. The delicate process of uncovering the bunker entrance took nearly 18 hours, with engineers ensuring the structure wouldn't collapse during excavation. When they finally breached the heavy metal door, rusted shut, but still locked from the outside, the team encountered a site that matched Ethan's drawings with chilling accuracy. A sophisticated underground prison built to hold 2 boys for years without detection. Linda and Michael made the difficult decision to tell Ethan about the discovery themselves, rather than having him learn through medical staff or news reports. They sat together in his hospital room, Michael holding his son's hand while Linda explained in gentle terms that they had found the bunker. Ethan's reaction surprised them. A look of profound relief crossed his face. "Noah won't be alone now," he said quietly. When Linda hesitantly asked if he wanted to help direct the search team to his brother's burial site, Ethan nodded with newfound resolve. "I need to be there," he insisted. "I promised him." After talking with his medical team and psychological advisors, arrangements were made for Ethan to visit the site under careful supervision. Dr. Cole would accompany him, along with a trauma-informed FBI agent who specialized in supporting victims during evidence recovery. The decision was controversial among some medical staff, who worried about re-traumatization, but Dr. Cole advocated strongly for Ethan's agency in this crucial moment. He survived 8 years of captivity by maintaining some sense of control, he argued. Taking that from him now could do more harm than good. The journey to the bunker site transformed Ethan. As the convoy of vehicles navigated the Forest Service roads, his posture straightened, his gaze sharpened, focusing on landmarks with eerie recognition. He directed them with unexpected confidence, pointing out features that hadn't appeared in any of his previous accounts. A distinctive lightning-struck tree, a boulder shaped like a turtle's shell, a clearing where wildflowers grew in unusual abundance. "He let us outside sometimes," Ethan explained, when Detective Chen remarked on his familiarity with the area. "Blindfolded, but I could smell things, feel the sun's position. I mapped it in my head." This revelation of spatial intelligence impressed the investigators. Ethan had been creating a mental escape route for years, memorizing sensory details despite sensory deprivation. When they reached the perimeter established around the bunker, Ethan paused, his breathing quickening. Dr. Cole moved to his side, applying the grounding techniques they had practiced. "You're safe," he reminded Ethan quietly. "You're in control now. We go no further than you want to go." The bunker excavation had revealed a sophisticated structure, concrete walls reinforced with steel, a self-contained water filtration system. Solar-powered batteries connected to hidden external panels and extensive food storage facilities. The construction suggested professional knowledge of architecture and engineering, narrowing the profile of potential suspects. Ethan confirmed he had never seen the exterior of the bunker during his captivity. His kidnapper had kept the brothers blindfolded during transport and their rare supervised excursions outside. Standing at the edge of the excavation, looking down at the exposed entrance, Ethan's composure faltered briefly. "He called it the Ark," he said, his voice barely audible. "Said the world above was dying and he was saving us from it. Played radio broadcasts about disasters, wars. We believed him at first. Thought maybe everyone was gone." This psychological manipulation explained part of the brothers' resignation to captivity in the early years. They had been convinced there was nowhere to escape to, no one searching for them. When asked about the burial site, Ethan oriented himself by the bunker entrance, then began counting steps aloud. The search team followed silently as he moved through the forest with deliberate precision, his eyes fixed on the ground before him. The surrounding trees created a natural cathedral, dappled light filtering through the canopy as birds called to one another overhead. The contrast of natural beauty against the horror of their purpose struck many of the officers accompanying them. After exactly 217 paces, Ethan stopped. A small clearing lay before them, unremarkable except for a slight depression in the earth and a ring of mushrooms that had sprouted in a nearly perfect circle. "Here," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "I wrapped him in his blanket, sang his favorite song. He wasn't in pain at the end." Linda, who had insisted on being present despite professional concerns, sank to her knees beside her son. Michael stood behind them, one hand on Ethan's shoulder, the other pressed against his chest, as though physically containing his grief. The recovery of Noah's remains proceeded with solemn dignity, the forensic team working with meticulous care under Ethan's watchful gaze. True to his account, They found the body wrapped in a faded blue blanket, buried approximately 4 feet below the surface. The preservation was remarkable, given the 3 years since burial, likely due to the soil composition and cool forest temperatures. Noah's Seattle Mariners cap, the twin to the one Ethan had carried home, was found placed over his heart, confirming the poignant detail of Ethan's caretaking in his brother's final moments. Medical examiner Dr. Prisha Patel conducted a preliminary examination at the scene, noting that the remains were consistent with a male teenager who had suffered from malnutrition and respiratory illness. There are no signs of traumatic injury, she informed the Harper family quietly. The cause of death appears consistent with pneumonia, as Ethan described. This confirmation provided a measure of grim comfort. While Noah had suffered, he had not been violently killed by their captor. As the recovery team prepared to transport Noah's remains, Ethan performed an unexpected ritual. From his pocket, he produced a small carved wooden figure, a crude bird with outstretched wings. "I made this for him," he explained to his parents. "Worked on it for months after he died. Hid it whenever he came down." The carving showed remarkable craftsmanship given the limited tools Ethan would have had access to, suggesting hours of patient work. Noah liked birds, said they were lucky because they could fly away whenever they wanted. Ethan placed the carving in the official evidence bag alongside his brother's remains, then turned to Detective Chen. "There's something else you should know," he said, his voice stronger than it had been since his return. "He had a camera in the ceiling of our room, always watching, and there were recordings, hundreds of them, stored in a room we weren't allowed to enter. He called it his archive, said we weren't the first." This revelation sent a ripple of alarm through the investigation team. If their kidnapper had taken other victims, had documented his crimes, the case had just expanded beyond the Harper brothers. The bunker wasn't just a crime scene. It was potentially evidence in multiple disappearances spanning an unknown period. The forensic examination of the bunker yielded disturbing confirmation of Ethan's claims. A hidden room accessible only through a false wall contains sophisticated recording equipment and hundreds of labeled storage drives. The timestamps on the earliest recordings dated back to 2003, 12 years before the Harper brothers' abduction, suggesting a pattern of predatory behavior long predating their captivity. FBI technicians established a secure data processing center to analyze the material, prioritizing identification of potential victims. Within days, they had matched footage to 3 previously unsolved disappearances. A college student from Washington State who vanished during a solo hiking trip in 2004, a pair of teenage cousins who went missing from a campground in 2009, and most recently, a nature photographer whose abandoned equipment was found in Olympic National Park in 2014. Agent Reeves coordinated with field offices across the Pacific Northwest to reopen these cold cases, while Detective Chen focused on establishing a timeline of the Harper brothers' captivity. Dr. Cole modified his therapeutic approach in response to these developments, recognizing that Ethan's recovery now encompassed not only processing his own trauma, but potentially helping to solve other crimes. "You have knowledge no one else has," he explained during a session focused on memory retrieval techniques. "But accessing those memories safely is crucial to your healing." Together, they developed a protocol that allowed Ethan to share information without becoming overwhelmed by traumatic recall. Using a combination of cognitive mapping, controlled exposure therapy, and narrative reconstruction, Ethan began to assemble a more coherent account of his 8 years in captivity. The most significant breakthrough came when he described the kidnapper's routine for bringing new residents to the bunker. He would disappear for days, sometimes weeks. When he returned, he'd be different, excited, talking more, bringing extra food. Then we'd hear noises from the third room, sometimes crying. These periods aligned with the disappearances now linked to the bunker footage, creating a pattern of escalating predatory behavior. Noah's funeral took place on a clear autumn day, the first break in the rain since Ethan's return. The service was private, attended only by family and close friends, though hundreds of community members lined the route to the cemetery in silent tribute. Ethan, still physically frail but increasingly present emotionally, insisted on being a pallbearer alongside his father and uncles. His face remained composed throughout the ceremony, breaking only when Linda placed Noah's second baseball cap, the one Ethan had carried home, atop the casket before it was lowered into the ground. Pastor Mason spoke of interrupted journeys and homecomings, of brothers separated by cruelty but united in love. After the formal service, Ethan stood alone by the grave for several minutes, speaking words too quiet for others to hear. When he rejoined his parents, something had shifted in his demeanor. A weight partly lifted, a promise fulfilled. "He knows I made it out," he told Linda, taking her hand. "He can rest now." The investigation gained momentum as forensic evidence from the bunker provided new leads. DNA analysis of hair samples found in the living quarters matched not only the Harper brothers, but also two previously unidentified genetic profiles, potentially representing victims whose disappearances had never been connected to the case. Financial records, subpoenaed from regional hardware stores and construction suppliers, revealed purchases of concrete, electrical components, and specialized ventilation equipment dating back to the early 2000s, paid for with cash, but requiring customer information for delivery. The name Robert Callahan appeared on multiple receipts, though no driver's license or social security number under that name could be verified as authentic. A composite sketch based on Ethan's descriptions was distributed to law enforcement agencies nationwide, along with a detailed profile developed by FBI behavioral analysts. Male, likely in his 60s now, with military or survivalist training, technically skilled but socially isolated, potentially harboring apocalyptic beliefs. Linda discovered an unexpected form of healing through advocacy. What began as private journal entries processing her grief evolved into a blog chronicling her family's journey toward recovery. Her honest accounts of Ethan's struggles, Michael's health challenges, and her own complicated emotions resonated with families of missing persons across the country. When approached by the Center for Missing and Exploited Children about speaking at their annual conference, Linda initially hesitated, uncomfortable with public speaking. Ethan encouraged her, recognizing that her story offered something rare and precious to those still searching. Hope that even after years of absence, return was possible. "Tell them about Noah, too," he urged. "How brave he was. How he never stopped believing we'd get out." Linda's presentation, delivered with quiet dignity, highlighted the importance of continuous support for families of the missing and advocated for improved coordination between agencies handling cold cases. Her final words became a rallying cry for the organization. "The search never truly ends until we bring them home, whether in life or in memory." The bunker's sophisticated construction became a focal point for investigators, seeking to identify its builder. Architectural analysis revealed professional-level knowledge of structural engineering, particularly relating to underground stability and ventilation systems. Agent Reeves assembled a specialized team to cross-reference this expertise with employment records from construction companies, engineering firms, and military installations across the Pacific Northwest. Their breakthrough came from an unexpected source: a retired Forest Service ranger who recognized similarities between the bunker design and emergency shelters constructed during the Cold War. Following this lead, they discovered that Robert Callahan had briefly worked as a civilian contractor for the Army Corps of Engineers in the 1980s, specializing in bunker construction and sustainable underground living facilities. His employment ended abruptly following a psychological evaluation that noted increasingly paranoid ideation and concerning preoccupation with societal collapse. Though he had effectively disappeared from official records afterward, this connection provided the first substantial background on their suspect. Ethan's recovery continued to progress in unexpected ways. Released from the hospital to home care, he developed a surprising affinity for gardening, spending hours tending the neglected flower beds around the Harper home. Dr. Cole observed that the activity combined multiple therapeutic elements: reconnection with nature after years underground, reassertion of control over his environment, and tangible evidence of his ability to nurture life. Linda noticed that Ethan spoke more freely while working with his hands, sharing memories of Noah that had previously been too painful to articulate. "We played word games to stay sharp," he explained while pruning roses. "Made up stories about what we'd do when we got out." Noah had this whole plan to become a marine biologist, study whales. These spontaneous recollections, unburdened by the pressure of formal interviews, provided both personal hewing and occasionally valuable investigative details. It was during one such gardening session that Ethan casually mentioned the kidnapper's distinctive ring: silver, with some kind of black stone that had a symbol carved in it. He always took it off before handling food. A description that would later prove crucial to identification. Detective Chen's methodical approach to evidence collection yielded an unexpected connection. While reviewing missing persons reports from the region surrounding Crescent Lake, she discovered the case of Amber and Jason Mercer, high school sweethearts who had vanished during a camping trip in 2003. Their disappearance predated the earliest recordings found in the bunker, but matched the pattern: young people isolated in wilderness areas. Chen brought photographs of the couple to one of Ethan's scheduled interviews, watching carefully for any reaction. His response was immediate and visceral, a sharp intake of breath, pupils dilating in recognition. "There were drawings," he said after a long silence, "pinned to the wall in his private room. I saw them once when he forgot to lock the door. A girl with long hair and a boy with glasses. He had written names underneath: Amber and Jason. First residence," it said. This connection not only expanded the timeline of crimes, but suggested an evolution in the kidnapper's methods, from opportunistic abduction to the calculated surveillance and planning evident in the Harper brothers case. The technological aspect of the investigation accelerated when FBI cybercrime specialists decrypted Robert Callahan's personal laptop, recovered from a hidden compartment in the bunker. The device contained meticulous records of potential targets, surveillance notes, and maps marking locations across 4 states with GPS coordinates. Cross-referencing. Most disturbing was a journal written in Jason's handwriting, documenting their captivity until abruptly ending mid-sentence 3 months after their disappearance. The final entry read simply, "He's taking Amber away today. Says I failed the test. If anyone finds this, tell our parents we tried to." Ethan's increasing stability allowed him to participate more actively in the investigation, though Dr. Cole maintained strict boundaries around his involvement. During a carefully structured session with Agent Reeves, Ethan provided crucial context for understanding their kidnappers' motivations. "He believed he was building a new society," Ethan explained, his voice steady as he recounted conversations overheard during his captivity. Called it selecting for survival. Said the modern world made people weak, dependent. The bunkers were his testing grounds to see who could adapt, who deserved to continue. This apocalyptic philosophy explained the pattern of paired abductions and the elaborate psychological manipulation documented in the bunker recordings. Survivors were those who demonstrated resilience, resourcefulness, and compliance with Callahan's arbitrary rules. Those who resisted, like Jason Mercer presumably, were removed from the program. When Agent Reeves gently asked why Ethan believed he had been kept alive after Noah's death, breaking the paired pattern, Ethan's composure faltered briefly. He said, "I had potential, that I understood the system." The implication was clear and horrifying. Callahan had been grooming Ethan as a potential successor. The coordinated search of Robert Callahan's properties yielded evidence connecting him to at least 11 abductions across 3 decades, making him one of the most prolific predators in Pacific Northwest history. 5 additional bunkers were discovered, each more sophisticated than the last, demonstrating the evolution of his methodology and technical skill. The remains of 4 victims were recovered, allowing families long trapped in uncertainty to finally lay their loved ones to rest. Most surprising was the discovery at the Montana property, a bunker that appeared to have been recently occupied, with fresh food supplies and current newspapers. Technical analysts determined that a sophisticated alarm system connected all the bunkers, potentially alerting Callahan to the discovery of the Oregon facility. Agent Reeves reconfigured the investigation as a manhunt, focusing resources on tracking the fugitive's movements. "He's been evading detection for decades," Reeves cautioned during an interagency briefing. "But he's never been hunted with the resources and information we now have." He made one critical mistake. He let Ethan live. National attention to the case reached unprecedented levels when the FBI added Robert Callahan to their 10 most wanted list. Media outlets ran special reports detailing the investigation and the Harper brothers' story, with particular focus on Ethan's survival and Noah's posthumous role in breaking the case. While the publicity complicated the Harper family's daily life, it also generated thousands of tips from across the country. A specialized task force sorted these reports, prioritizing sightings that matched Callahan's age, appearance, and behavioral patterns. 3 weeks into the manhunt, a forest ranger in Northern California reported encountering an older man with a distinctive limp at a remote cabin rental. The man had reacted defensively when the ranger mentioned increased patrols due to the FBI alert, immediately paying his balance in cash and departing before his scheduled checkout. Surveillance footage from a nearby general store confirmed the sighting matched Callahan's description, providing the first concrete lead on his current location. Ethan experienced a pivotal therapeutic breakthrough during this period, facilitated by a specialized trauma treatment called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. The technique helped him process traumatic memories without becoming overwhelmed by their emotional content. During one particularly intense session, Ethan accessed a memory he had previously suppressed, an early escape attempt when Noah was too ill to travel. "I could have gotten away," he revealed, tears streaming down his face. "I made it almost a mile before I turned back. Couldn't leave him alone." This decision had haunted him with guilt and self-recrimination, emotions he had buried beneath the more immediate trauma of captivity. Dr. Cole helped him reframe this choice not as weakness, but as profound loyalty and love. "You didn't stay because you were afraid," Dr. Cole observed gently. "You stayed because you were brave enough to face continued captivity rather than abandon your brother." This perspective shift marked a turning point in Ethan's recovery, allowing him to begin integrating his experience into a narrative he could live with. The California lead narrowed the search area to the Shasta Trinity National Forest, where tactical teams established a perimeter around potential escape routes. Drone surveillance identified an isolated cabin matching witness descriptions, and thermal imaging confirmed a single occupant. The arrest operation was planned with extreme caution, given Callahan's history of sophisticated preparations and potential for violence. In the pre-dawn hours, FBI tactical units surrounded the property, using specialized audio equipment to monitor movement inside. The approach was silent and coordinated, with agents prepared for various defensive scenarios. What they encountered instead was unexpected. The cabin door stood open, and Robert Callahan sat in an armchair facing the entrance, a hunting rifle across his knees. He offered no resistance when ordered to surrender, speaking only to ask if the Harper boy was the one who had identified him. After secure transport to a federal holding facility, preliminary psychiatric evaluation noted that Callahan appeared remarkably calm, even satisfied, as though the conclusion of his decades-long predation had been inevitable or even planned. News of Callahan's capture reached the Harper family during dinner, delivered personally by Detective Chen and Sheriff Ortiz. The moment carried a strange anticlimactic quality, The boogeyman who had dominated their lives for 8 years, reduced to a fragile old man in handcuffs. Michael sat heavily in his chair, years of tension visibly draining from his shoulders. Linda pressed her hands to her mouth, unable to find words adequate to the moment. Ethan's reaction was the most complex. A brief flash of fear, followed by visible relief, and finally, something like confusion. "Is it really over?" he asked, his voice small. Chen confirmed that Callahan was in custody and facing multiple life sentences without possibility of parole. The evidence was overwhelming. He would never walk free again. That night, for the first time since his return, Ethan slept without Noah's cat beside him. When Linda checked on him in the early morning hours, she found him resting peacefully, one hand extended toward the window where dawn light was just beginning to filter through, reaching for the sun. Robert Callahan's arrest brought a flood of media attention to Ridgemont, transforming the quiet town into the epicenter of a national conversation about trauma, survival, and justice. News vans clogged Main Street, reporters ambushed community members for quotes, and curious outsiders conducted makeshift tours of sites connected to the case. The Harper family retreated further into privacy, with Michael's deteriorating health providing legitimate reason to decline interview requests. Linda installed blackout curtains and changed their phone number, creating a fortress of solitude around their home. Ethan, who had been making steady progress in his recovery, experienced a significant setback in this charged atmosphere. His anxiety spiked, manifesting in panic attacks and insomnia. During one particularly difficult episode, paramedics were called when he became convinced Callahan had escaped and was watching the house. Dr. Cole adjusted his treatment plan, implementing more intensive support and recommending temporary relocation to a quieter setting. The family reluctantly agreed, moving to a lakeside cabin owned by Linda's sister in a neighboring county, where they could heal away from public scrutiny. The preliminary hearing for United States versus Callahan revealed disturbing new details about the extent of his crimes. Prosecutors presented evidence linking him to 17 abductions spanning 3 decades, though they believe the actual number might be higher. Most shocking was the revelation that Callahan had maintained detailed journals documenting his survival project, including psychological assessments of his victims and notes on their performance in captivity. The clinical detachment of these writings chilled even veteran law enforcement personnel. Ethan, who had initially insisted on attending the proceedings despite professional concerns, found himself unable to remain in the courtroom when excerpts from these journals were read aloud. The entry regarding Noah's illness proved particularly devastating. Subject N showing decreased viability. Respiratory infection progressing despite basic antibiotics. Subject E demonstrating superior adaptation through caretaking behavior. Valuable data on stress response and resource allocation under scarcity conditions. The reduction of their suffering to experimental observations of Noah's death to data unleashed a rage in Ethan that surprised even him. Outside the courthouse, he shattered his car window with a single punch, then collapsed in Linda's arms, sobbing with grief that felt fresh and raw despite the years that had passed. The psychological toll extended beyond the immediate Harper family to ripple through the broader community. Ridgemont residents who had participated in the original search efforts experienced renewed guilt and questioning. Had they missed something? Could they have found the boy sooner? The discovery of multiple victims raised uncomfortable questions about other unsolved disappearances in the region, creating an atmosphere of retrospective fear. Parents became hyper-vigilant about their children's activities, restricting freedoms that had once been the hallmark of rural life. The school board implemented new security protocols, and attendance at wilderness safety workshops surged. Local therapist Dr. Eleanor Martinez organized community healing circles to address this collective trauma, creating space for residents to process their complicated emotions. What happened to the Harper brothers and the other victims isn't just their story, she explained during one session. It's become part of our community's story, and we need to acknowledge how it has changed us. These conversations gradually shifted from fear and guilt toward resilience and prevention, with particular focus on supporting Ethan's reintegration into community life. 6 months after Callahan's arrest, as the case progressed toward trial, Ethan faced a wrenching decision. Prosecutors believed his testimony would be crucial in securing multiple life sentences. But Dr. Cole worried about the psychological impact of reliving his trauma in such a public adversarial setting. The final choice fell to Ethan himself. After days of contemplation and consultation with his parents and treatment team, he made his decision during a private meeting with the lead prosecutor. "I'll testify," he said, his voice steady but subdued. "But I need to do it once, completely, without interruption. I can't be cross-examined for days, picked apart question by question." This unusual request reflected both psychological necessity and practical concern. Ethan's recovery depended on maintaining boundaries around how and when he engaged with his trauma. The prosecution team, recognizing the unique circumstances, negotiated a modified testimony arrangement that would protect Ethan while satisfying legal requirements. When asked why he was willing to endure the ordeal despite the risks, Ethan's answer was simple. "Noah can't speak for himself. Neither can the others. Someone has to tell the truth about what happened in those bunkers." The preparation for Ethan's testimony revealed unexpected depths to his captivity experience. Working with Dr. Cole and the prosecution team, he reconstructed a chronology that highlighted patterns invisible to him while living through them. Callahan had established elaborate psychological tests disguised as arbitrary rule changes, rewards, and punishments. Food would be withheld without explanation, then provided in abundance alongside praise for resilience. The brothers would be separated for weeks, then reunited and encouraged to share what they had told each other during isolation. "He was always listening, always evaluating," Ethan explained. "We learned to perform, to show enough distress to satisfy him, but not so much that he'd see us as weak." This psychological manipulation explained certain behaviors that had puzzled investigators, like Ethan's initial reluctance to accept medical help despite severe malnutrition. The most devastating revelation came during a preparation session focused on Noah's final months. Ethan disclosed that Callahan had access to antibiotics that might have saved his brother's life, but had withheld them as part of his selection philosophy. He said Noah wasn't adapting properly, wasn't worthy of resources. This deliberate medical neglect transformed the charges against Callahan, adding an element of premeditation to Noah's death that elevated the case to capital murder in states where the death penalty remained an option. The Harper family now faced another moral crucible: whether to advocate for the ultimate punishment for the man who had destroyed so much of their lives. 10 months after his emergence from the forest, Ethan Harper took his first tentative steps toward formal education. The traditional high school environment was deemed too overwhelming, but a local community college offered an alternative program for adult learners returning to academics after significant interruptions. With support from Dr. Cole and a specialized educational therapist, Ethan enrolled in 2 courses, Introduction to Computer Science and Creative Writing. The structure provided welcome routine, while the content engaged both his pre-abduction interests and the new forms of expression he had developed during recovery. His presence on campus required careful management. A private study room was made available for breaks, and faculty received training in trauma-informed educational practices. Fellow students, briefed on appropriate boundaries without specific details of his history, created a protective community around him. During his first creative writing workshop, Ethan shared a short piece about 2 brothers watching stars through a narrow window. Fictional, but emotionally authentic. The respectful reception of this work, judged on its literary merits rather than its autobiographical subtext, marked a significant milestone. For 45 minutes, Ethan had been simply a student among students, defined by his words rather than his trauma. The Harper family's journey toward a new normal included reconciling with the past while building for the future. Linda channeled her experience into formal advocacy, accepting a position with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children as a family liaison for long-term cases. Her perspective as someone on the other side of the search provided unique value to families enduring similar uncertainty. Michael focused on improving his health, following a strict cardiac rehabilitation program and making peace with his limitations. Most surprising was the family's decision to remain in Ridgemont despite its complicated associations. "This is where Noah is," Linda explained, when questioned about their choice. "And it's where people knew him as more than a victim, as a baseball player, a friend, a boy who loved science fiction and hated Brussels sprouts." The community responded to their commitment with both respect for their privacy and practical support. Neighbors established an unspoken security network, gently redirecting curious visitors and media. The local diner reserved a private corner booth for Harper family meals. Pastor Mason coordinated volunteers for home maintenance projects Michael could no longer manage. These acts of collective care demonstrated that while the tragedy had altered Ridgemont's identity, it had also strengthened the community's fundamental character. The legal proceedings against Robert Callahan reached a critical juncture when his defense team approached the prosecution with an unexpected proposal. Callahan would plead guilty to all charges and provide complete information about additional victims in exchange for removal of the death penalty from consideration. This offer presented an agonizing dilemma for the families involved, particularly the Harpers. Linda and Michael spent days in prayer and consultation with their faith community, ultimately reaching the conclusion that closure for other families outweighed their desire for maximum punishment. "More death won't bring Noah back," Michael told the prosecutors during a private meeting. "But the truth might bring others home." Their decision wasn't universally supported. Some victim families felt Callahan deserved execution, but it was respected as deeply personal. The plea agreement was finalized with an unusual stipulation. Callahan would make his full confession not only to law enforcement, but directly to Ethan, under controlled conditions, and only if Ethan himself consented. When presented with this possibility, Ethan's response surprised even Dr. Cole. "I want to look him in the eye," he said, "not because I need answers from him, but because I want him to see that he failed. Noah and I beat his system. We never stopped being brothers." The supervised confrontation between Ethan Harper and Robert Callahan took place in a secure conference room at the federal courthouse, recorded for both legal documentation and therapeutic processing. Dr. Cole remained at Ethan's side throughout, while Agent Reeves and Detective Chen observed through one-way glass. Callahan entered in shackles, appearing smaller and more frail than his mythic presence in Ethan's nightmares. A bitter old man in an orange jumpsuit, his former power reduced to memory. The initial exchange was tense with unspoken emotion, Callahan studying Ethan with clinical detachment, while Ethan met his gaze with steady resolve. "You look well," Callahan finally remarked, his tone suggesting professional assessment rather than human concern. "The adaptation phase is progressing as anticipated." This attempt to re-establish his evaluative position, to frame Ethan's recovery as part of his experimental design, might once have triggered submission or fear. Instead, Ethan responded with quiet authority. "This isn't your project anymore. I'm not your subject." What followed was not the dramatic confrontation observers might have expected, but something more profound: Ethan systematically reclaiming narrative control, correcting Callahan's terminology, rejecting his framing, and occasionally interrupting with simple statements of fact. When Callahan referred to Noah's death as unfortunate but informative, Ethan stopped him cold. His name was Noah Harper. He was 14 years old. He loved baseball and wanted to study marine biology. "He was my brother, not your data point." By the end of the session, a subtle shift had occurred in the power dynamic. Callahan provided the factual information required by the plea agreement, but his psychological framework had been dismantled. As guards led him away, Ethan's parting words resonated through the room. "You didn't break us." Even at the end, Noah died as himself. The information provided by Callahan led investigators to 3 previously unknown bunker locations and helped identify 5 additional victims whose disappearances had never been connected to the case. Families who had lived with uncertainty for decades finally received confirmation of their loved ones' fates. Recovery operations continued for months, with specialized teams working to preserve evidence while treating remains with appropriate dignity. Each identification triggered its own ripple of grief and relief, each family navigating their unique path through long-delayed mourning. The Harper family, further along in their journey, offered quiet support to these newly identified victims' relatives, creating an informal network of shared experience. Detective Chen, whose career had become defined by the case, coordinated a memorial service where families could gather without media presence, honoring lives that had ended in isolation but would be remembered in community. For Ethan, each recovery brought complex emotions: the relief of providing closure to others, the guilt of being the sole survivor, and gradually, a growing acceptance of his role as both witness and advocate. During a private moment at the memorial, an elderly woman whose grandson had disappeared in 2006 approached him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for making it out," she said simply, squeezing his hand. "Thank you for remembering them." This expression of gratitude for his survival, rather than sympathy for his suffering, marked a subtle but significant shift in how Ethan understood his place in the aftermath, not just as a victim who had endured, but as a keeper of sacred memory. 1 year after his return, Ethan Harper stood before a different kind of audience: 20 high school seniors attending a wilderness safety workshop. His participation had been carefully planned with his treatment team, balancing therapeutic benefit against potential stress. Rather than focusing on his captivity, Ethan shared practical knowledge: how to create mental maps of unfamiliar terrain, the importance of informing others of trip plans, techniques for remaining oriented even when visibility is limited. The students listened with rapt attention, aware of the unique authority behind his guidance. During the question period, one girl raised her hand hesitantly. "Are you scared to go back into the forest now?" The room fell silent, teachers exchanging concerned glances at the personal nature of the question. Ethan considered his response thoughtfully. "I'm not scared of the forest," he finally answered. "The trees and rivers didn't hurt us, but I respect the wilderness in a different way now. I understand its power to hide things, both dangerous and beautiful." This nuanced perspective, acknowledging trauma without surrendering to fear, reflected his ongoing integration of experience into wisdom. After the workshop, several students approached to thank him, not with the awkward pity he had come to expect, but with genuine appreciation for practical knowledge that might keep them safe. The trial phase of United States versus Callahan concluded with a sentencing hearing that balanced justice with psychological closure for the victims' families. Callahan received consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole for each confirmed victim, ensuring he would remain incarcerated until death, regardless of future legal developments. The Harper family chose not to attend the sentencing, instead spending the day at Noah's favorite fishing spot on the Ridgemont River. They brought a small picnic, peanut butter sandwiches, and root beer, Noah's preferred combination, and took turns reading passages from books he had enjoyed. Ethan skipped stones across the water, demonstrating the technique he had taught his younger brother years before. The simplicity of these rituals marked a new phase in their grieving process, remembering Noah not just through the lens of tragedy, but reclaiming the joyful moments that had defined his life. As afternoon light filtered through the trees, casting dappled patterns on the water, Linda noticed something remarkable. Ethan was smiling, genuinely and without reservation, as he described Noah's disastrous attempt to catch a trout with his bare hands. This ability to access happy memories without being immediately dragged back into trauma represented hard-won progress, the result of months of therapeutic work and family healing. Ethan's recovery entered a new phase as he began to explore his own identity beyond survival and testimony. The computer science course had rekindled his pre-abduction interest in technology, revealing aptitude that had matured despite his isolation. He demonstrated particular talent for problem-solving and logical thinking, skills that had been honed rather than diminished by his captivity experience. His therapeutic art had evolved from processing trauma to exploring creative expression, with several pieces selected for inclusion in a traveling exhibition about resilience. Most significant was his developing relationship with Emma Chen, Detective Chen's niece, who volunteered at the community center where Ethan attended group therapy. Their friendship had begun cautiously, both aware of the unusual circumstances of their connection, but gradually deepened through shared interests in hiking, photography, and classic science fiction. Unlike others in Ethan's life, Emma had no protocol about their first official date, dinner at the local pizza place followed by stargazing at the community observatory. His demeanor conveyed both nervous excitement and pride. "I didn't talk about the bunker once," he reported. "We just talked about normal stuff, movies and school, and whether aliens exist." The Harper family marked the one-year anniversary of Ethan's return with a private ceremony that balanced commemoration with forward movement. They planted a pair of red maple saplings in their backyard, one for each brother, positioned so that as they grew, their branches would eventually intertwine. The symbolism was both acknowledgement of permanent separation and affirmation of enduring connection. Michael, whose health had stabilized through careful management, read a passage from The Hobbit that had sustained the brothers during their captivity. "There is nothing like looking if you want to find something. You certainly usually find something if you look, but it is not always quite the something you were after." Linda shared a letter she had written to Noah during the years of searching, a document of unwavering maternal love across absence. Ethan's contribution was unexpected, a song he had composed on the guitar he was relearning to play, with lyrics that addressed both his lost brother and his reclaimed self. The melody was simple but haunting. This ritual of remembrance, without being consumed by grief, represented their new equilibrium, acknowledging the wound that would always be part of their family story, while refusing to allow it to define their future. The broader impact of the Harper case extended beyond individual healing to institutional change. The investigation had exposed critical gaps in missing persons protocols, particularly regarding cases involving remote wilderness areas and cross-jurisdictional coordination. Senator Maria Vasquez, whose district included Ridgemont, introduced legislation establishing a specialized National Park Service unit dedicated to missing persons cases within federal lands. The Harper-Mercer Initiative, named for the first and last confirmed victims of Callahan's crimes, provided resources for advanced training, technology implementation, and improved evidence preservation in challenging environmental conditions. Detective Chen, whose relentless work had been instrumental in breaking the case, was appointed as liaison between local law enforcement and the new federal program. The formal announcement took place at Ridgemont Community Hall, with the Harper family in attendance. 18 months after emerging from the forest, Ethan Harper faced a decision that symbolized his transition from surviving to living, whether to apply to college programs beyond commuting distance from home. His academic progress had exceeded expectations, with stellar performance in his community college courses suggesting readiness for more advanced study. Several universities had discreetly indicated interest, offering specialized support structures and flexibility regarding his unique background. The prospect of living independently triggered understandable anxiety for the entire family. Linda worried about Ethan's ability to manage without their immediate support. while Michael feared that distance would interrupt the medical care and therapeutic relationships that had been so crucial to recovery. Ethan himself experienced conflicting desires, the healthy developmental pull toward independence, competing with the security of familiar surroundings. After weeks of family discussion, Ethan made his choice. He would apply to Pacific Northwest University's computer science program, located 3 hours from Ridgemont, far enough for genuine independence, but close enough for regular visits home. The decision represented a calculated risk, a step into uncertainty that acknowledged fear without being governed by it. "I can't spend my life afraid of what might happen," he explained to his parents. "That's still letting him control me." The transition to university life required careful planning and gradual implementation. During the summer before his first semester, Ethan participated in an orientation program specifically designed for students with trauma backgrounds, establishing connections with key support staff and familiarizing himself with campus resources. Rather than standard dormitory housing, he arranged to share an apartment with 2 slightly older students who had been briefed about his needs without invasive details of his history. Dr. Cole coordinated with the university's counseling services to ensure therapeutic continuity, while Linda and Michael prepared for their own adjustment to a quieter household. Move-in day arrived with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. As they unloaded boxes and arranged Ethan's new space, Linda noticed subtle evidence of his thoughtful preparation: the bed positioned to allow clear sightlines to the door, a nightlight for the bathroom, noise-canceling headphones on the desk. These adaptations weren't manifestations of lingering fear, but practical tools for managing specific triggers, signs of self-awareness rather than limitation. When the moment came for his parents to leave, Ethan surprised them with steady composure. "I'll call you tomorrow," he promised, embracing each of them. "But I think I'm going to be okay." The academic environment proved unexpectedly welcoming for Ethan's unique perspective. In computer science courses, his analytical thinking and problem-solving abilities placed him among the top students, while his life experience brought unusual depth to humanities discussions. Professors noted his distinctive approach to challenges: patient, methodical, and remarkably resilient when faced with setbacks. Rather than hiding his history, Ethan developed a measured approach to disclosure, neither defined by his past nor pretending it didn't exist. This authentic self-presentation attracted genuine friendships based on shared interests rather than curiosity or pity. His relationship with Emma deepened into a partnership grounded in mutual respect and understanding, her natural empathy complementing his hard-earned wisdom. During his sophomore year, Ethan's academic focus crystallized around cybersecurity and digital privacy, fields where his heightened awareness of vulnerability could be channeled into protective innovation. His first independent research project explored secure communication systems for vulnerable populations, combining technical expertise with profound understanding of psychological safety needs. When a guest lecturer from a major technology company recognized the exceptional insight behind the work and offered a summer internship, Ethan accepted with quiet pride. The position not only validated his intellectual capabilities, but represented meaningful contribution to a field dedicated to protecting others, a purpose that resonated with his evolving identity. Linda and Michael Harper found their own paths forward as Ethan established independence. Linda's work with families of missing persons expanded into a full-time role, coordinating support services across multiple states. Her approach combined practical guidance with emotional understanding, earned through lived experience rather than professional training. Michael, though still managing chronic health issues, volunteered with a mentorship program for fatherless boys in Ridgemont, offering fishing lessons and woodworking instruction that honored Noah's memory while serving community needs. Together, they established a scholarship fund in Noah's name, supporting students interested in marine biology, the future he had imagined for himself during those long days of captivity. The Foundation's annual fundraising event became a celebration of possibility rather than a commemoration of loss, featuring student research presentations alongside live music and community activities. What had begun as a private family tragedy evolved into a public legacy of education, protection, and hope. During the 5th annual ceremony, Michael addressed the gathered community with words that captured their journey. Grief doesn't end, but it changes shape. It becomes part of who you are rather than all that you are. Noah lives on not just in our memories, but in the good that has grown from our darkest days. The watershed moment in Ethan's recovery came unexpectedly during a summer camping trip with friends from university. The expedition had been carefully planned, a weekend at a popular lakeside site with clear trails and regular ranger patrols, but represented Ethan's first voluntary return to overnight wilderness immersion since his captivity. The first evening passed pleasantly, with fishing and campfire conversations creating an atmosphere of comfortable camaraderie. After midnight, however, a sudden thunderstorm awoke the group, heavy rain pounding against their tents, while lightning illuminated the surrounding forest in stark flashes. Ethan's friends watched him anxiously, aware that the conditions might trigger traumatic memories of his emergence from captivity. Instead, they witnessed something remarkable. Ethan calmly helping secure equipment against the wind, his movements deliberate and assured. When offered shelter in the central cabin, he declined, choosing to remain in his tent despite the storm. The following morning, as they assessed minor damage to their site, Emma asked quietly if he had been afraid. Ethan considered the question seriously before responding. "I felt the fear," he acknowledged. "But I also felt the difference. I knew exactly where I was. I knew all of you were nearby. I knew the storm would pass." This distinction between experiencing fear and being controlled by it represented the essence of his transformation. Not freedom from trauma's imprint, but the capacity to contextualize it within a broader life narrative. On the 3rd anniversary of his return, Ethan Harper published an open letter in the national press addressed to families of missing persons. The document avoided sensationalism or false promises, offering instead honest reflection on his journey through loss, survival, and rebuilding. "There is no single path through this wilderness," he wrote. "Each person who vanishes leaves a unique absence, and each return, whether in life or in memory, requires its own map home." He addressed the complex reality of recovery, acknowledging that reunion isn't an endpoint, but the beginning of a different journey. Most powerfully, he spoke directly to those still searching. Hope is not naive. Hope is not denial. Hope is the deliberate choice to keep a space open in your heart while facing reality with clear eyes. Noah hoped until his last breath, and that hope sustained us both in darkness. Whatever happens, that hope itself has value. The letter concluded with a commitment rather than consolation, a promise to use his unique perspective to improve systems, support families, and honor those who never returned. Public response was immediate and profound, with families across the country expressing gratitude for his willingness to address difficult truths while affirming the dignity of their ongoing search. For Ethan, the publication marked a crucial integration, embracing his role as both survivor and witness without being defined solely by victimhood. In choosing to reach back into darkness to guide others toward light, he demonstrated the most profound form of healing, the transformation of personal suffering into compassionate action. A quiet evening in Ethan's senior year of college brought unexpected resolution to one of the case's lingering mysteries. While reviewing old files for a research paper on trauma-informed investigation techniques, Detective Chen discovered a partial fingerprint from the Idaho bunker that had initially been classified as unusable. Advanced digital enhancement revealed a unique pattern that, when run through expanded federal databases, matched a previously unidentified set of remains discovered in a remote California ravine in 2016. The timing and location aligned with Callahan's movements after the discovery of the Oregon bunker. suggesting he had taken his own life rather than face capture. This confirmation, while anticlimactic, provided closure to an aspect of the case that had troubled investigators. The possibility, however remote, of Callahan having unknown accomplices or protégés. When Chen called to share the news with Ethan, his response reflected how far he had come in his healing journey. "I'm glad to know," he said after a thoughtful pause, "but it doesn't change anything important. He stopped existing for me the day I walked out of that courtroom." This capacity to acknowledge Callahan's death without attaching emotional significance to it demonstrated Ethan's ultimate victory, reclaiming ownership of a life story in which his captor had been reduced to a minor character rather than the defining antagonist. Graduation day arrived with perfect spring weather, campus trees in full bloom, as if celebrating alongside the students. Ethan sat among his peers in alphabetical order, the Harper name placing him midway through the ceremony. Linda and Michael watched from the audience, Michael's health having stabilized enough for the 3-hour drive to campus. They were joined by an unexpected contingent: Detective Chen and Dr. Cole, Sheriff Ortiz, Agent Reeves, and 3 families whose missing loved ones had been identified through Ethan's testimony. Emma, graduating with honors in psychology, had already crossed the stage to enthusiastic applause from the Harper section. When Ethan's name was called, the dean added an unplanned addendum to his introduction, graduating summa cum laude with departmental distinction for his research on secure communication protocols for vulnerable populations. The project that had begun as personal healing had evolved into pioneering work at the intersection of technology and human safety, earning recognition beyond academic circles. As Ethan accepted his diploma, the applause carried a quality of collective triumph, acknowledging not just educational achievement, but a more fundamental victory: the reclamation of potential that might have been lost forever in the darkness beneath Crescent Lake. The post-graduation gathering at the Harpers' home balanced celebration with remembrance. Noah's presence was acknowledged through small, deliberate touches, his favorite music playing softly in the background. His childhood photos included among the displays of Ethan's academic journey. Linda had prepared his signature party dish, chocolate cupcakes with peanut butter frosting, alongside more sophisticated fare. These gestures honored his memory without overshadowing the day's achievement, illustrating the family's evolving relationship with grief. During the informal toasts, Michael surprised everyone by producing a small wooden box, hand-carved and polished to a warm glow. "Noah started this in woodshop, 8th grade," he explained, voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "I found it in the garage last year, just the rough pieces. Thought it was time to finish it." Inside rested 2 items: Noah's original mariner's cap, the one Ethan had carried from the forest, and a job offer letter from the newly established Northwest Missing Persons Technology Initiative, inviting Ethan to lead their digital security division after graduation. The position represented perfect synthesis of his technical skills and lived experience, creating systems to protect vulnerable individuals while improving communication between agencies searching for the missing. As Ethan examined the letter, Detective Chen added context. "They created the position with you in mind. No one else has your particular combination of expertise." The moment crystallized Ethan's journey, the path from victim to survivor to advocate, now extending into professional identity, tragedy transformed into purposeful vocation. The media's periodic interest in the Harper case flared again on the 5-year anniversary of Ethan's return, with documentary filmmakers and book publishers making increasingly generous offers for exclusive rights to his story. Ethan consistently declined these opportunities, uncomfortable with the prospect of his personal trauma being packaged as entertainment. Instead, he channeled his communication through more constructive avenues, contributing to law enforcement training programs, consulting on improved search protocols, and occasionally speaking at carefully selected conferences. His approach emphasized practical applications rather than sensationalized details, focusing on systems that failed and how they could be strengthened. This principled stance earned respect within professional circles while allowing. When a particularly persistent producer suggested his reluctance stemmed from unresolved trauma, Ethan's response reflected his hard-won wisdom. "My story isn't finished yet. I'm still writing it every day, and it's about much more than what happened in that bunker." This perspective, refusing to be defined by captivity while acknowledging its formative impact, characterized Ethan's integrated identity, neither denying the past nor remaining imprisoned within it. Ethan and Emma's wedding took place on a brilliant autumn day. The ceremony held in Ridgemont's community park beside a grove of maples whose leaves had turned the exact crimson of the saplings planted in the Harper yard years before. The couple had chosen to build their life together in a small house on the outskirts of town, close enough to maintain connection with family while establishing independent roots. Their vows, written together during a month-long process of reflection, addressed their unique journey with candor and hope. "I choose you with full knowledge of our scars," Ethan promised, "and with boundless faith in our capacity to heal." Emma responded with equal clarity. "I choose you not despite your past, but alongside it, walking with you into a future we will define together." The reception afterward blended traditional celebration with meaningful ritual, an empty chair at the family table draped with Noah's baseball jersey, a moment of silence honoring all those who had been taken by Callahan, followed immediately by joyful music that affirmed life's persistence. During their first dance, Linda whispered to Michael, "Noah would have loved this," to which he replied, "He does." The present tense and acknowledgement of their son's enduring presence in their hearts. As twilight deepened into evening, lanterns were again released into the sky, but this time accompanying wedding wishes rather than memorial prayers, illuminating the night not as defiance against darkness, but as natural extension of daylight, part of life's continuous cycle. The decade marker of Ethan's return coincided with the birth of his and Emma's first child, a son they named Nathan Michael Harper, honoring Noah's memory while creating space for a unique identity. Holding his newborn in the quiet hospital room, Ethan experienced the full circle of his journey, from a teenager whose future had been violently interrupted to a man embracing life's most profound continuation. The protective instincts that flooded him were not rooted in fear, but in profound appreciation for life's fragility and preciousness. When Linda and Michael arrived to meet their grandson, the 4 generations present in the room, Nathan newly arrived, Ethan and Emma in their prime, the elder Harpers now showing signs of age, formed a living testament to resilience and renewal. Later that evening, after visitors had departed, Ethan took his son to the window where stars were becoming visible in the twilight sky. "There's someone I wish you could have met," he murmured to the sleeping infant. "But I'll tell you all about him as you grow, how brave he was, how he loved to look at the stars and imagine worlds beyond this one." The moment contained neither bitterness nor regret, only the peaceful acknowledgement of a presence that would always be part of their family story. A legacy of courage transformed from tragedy to inspiration, carried forward in the middle name of a child who would grow up knowing he was part of something larger than himself. A family that had journeyed through the darkest forest and emerged, changed but unbroken, into the light of common day.